Thank you all for coming today. Today we are having a bushfire special, just in case you haven't realized. I'm going to talk about the economics of prescribed burning, and then later on in the business school we have Dr. Edward Keating talking about air attack on wildfires. So, you know, no lunch, no food for anyone, just keep going on seminars. Very important today. So, for the benefit of anyone that doesn't know me, I'm a research associate here in the School of Agriculture and Resource Economics, and I did a PhD on the cost and benefits of prescribed burning. So today I'm going to show you the results of my PhD. I've shown some results before, but there were some analyses done after that that are quite interesting, so I would like to focus on those today, but I'll touch a little bit on those that I have presented before as well, for the benefit of those that haven't seen it. So next week I'm going to a conference that will be full of fire managers. So hopefully a lot of this information is going to be useful to them, and the talk has been designed to be addressed, it's been targeted for fire managers. So Maxim, you are the fire manager of the Department of Parks and Wildlife today. Ben, you're the fire manager for the Department of Fire and Emergency Services. Tosh, you're a firefighter, we know that. And Cheryl, you are the director of the Office of Bushfire and Risk Management. So if this information is useful to you, I need you guys to talk to me afterwards. But I've modified it a little bit.
Who are the rest of the people?
Yeah, all firefighters. Volunteers, yeah. So, I've changed a little bit the talk as well, for this seminar today. But the talk is mainly targeted to fire managers. So just a little bit of background. What is the problem in terms, when we are talking about bushfires? We know that recently, in the last few decades, there's been an increase in the frequency of very large and intense wildfires. And they have caused significant damages to ecosystems, social and economic impacts, the environment. So we know that this can be very damaging fires. And this is in Australia and worldwide. The problem as well is that we have seen substantial increases in suppression expenditures. But the risk with that is that they will continue to increase, but there will be no change to the frequency of these large fires, large and intense fires. So there's been a lot of debate on prescribed burning, particularly since the Black Saturday fires, where there has been a recommendation for increases in the area prescribed burn. And so there have been recommendations for increasing the level of investment as well in prescribed burning. This is in Australia. But fire managers need to have a clear picture and need to know what are the costs and the benefits of actually doing that, of the practice in itself, and what are the consequences of changing the level of investment. The problem is that economic analysis of prescribed burning are very rare, and more generally, economic analysis of bushfire management options are very rare. It's a very complex system, so we're lacking on this type of analysis to help fire managers see where they get the best value for money in terms of their investments. So what is the economic problem? When we talk about the economics of bushfire management, we have a problem of resource allocation. So what do we do with those resources? How do we allocate them? And how many do we allocate to prescribed burning? What is the level of investment in prescribed burning or in other bushfire management options that actually maximizes the benefits to society? Maybe if we do too little, when we're talking about prescribed burning, we might get more damages and more suppression expenditures. But if we do too much, we might be using resources that instead could be used elsewhere and generate high benefits for society. So if we have a pot of money, what's the best way to use it? This is the questions that we had behind this economic analysis of prescribed burning. And how do we get the best value for money? So fire agencies, they invest significant amounts of money in mitigation and response strategies for wildfires, but it's really hard for them to know where they get the highest returns. So what's out there already? What was out there when I started to do this PhD? What did I see in the literature? I saw a lot of work on prescribed burning by itself, so estimating the cost of prescribed burning, mostly in the US, what influences this cost, all in the US, and estimated sometimes some of the benefits of the practice. Suppression as well. There was a lot of work on the cost of suppression and what influences those costs and the trend in terms of the increase in suppression expenditures. And there was also some separate work on damages. What are the total damages of individual fire events? Or how do these fires impact intangible values? For us, is non-market values or intangibles. But they were all kind of separated. So there wasn't really kind of something that will link all of them together. So my aim in my PhD was just to put them all kind of in the same box and have some integrated analysis of all the options. So questions will be like, well, if we put more money into prescribed burning and a little bit less into suppression, what will be the consequences for the damages? Would they also be smaller? And if we have a lot less prescribed burning, will we have to increase then suppression expenditures by a lot? And will the damages then in that case increase by a lot as well? So these is kind of the questions that were behind this analysis. In terms of the research questions, I wanted to answer 3 key questions. What is the level of prescribed burning that minimizes the sum of management cost and damages? So the sum of prescribed burning cost, suppression cost, and damages for the specific case study area that I selected. Is the optimal level clear-cut, or is there a range of levels that are very close to the optimal? So do we have something like this, where it's kind of really quite clear-cut and we can see very easily what's the best option, or we have something like this where there are many options where changing it a little bit doesn't make much of a difference? And what difference does it make to plan for the short term and the long term? In a lot of cases, some decisions in fire management are made for the short term, and some of the thinking as well goes in terms of the long term. I wanted to just have a look at this exercise of comparing both analyses to see what they will tell me. So just before I continue with a little bit of what I did, I'll give you the results and then you can leave the seminar straight away if you choose to. But hopefully you'll stay for the whole time. So the short-term analysis, I discovered that it underestimates the benefits of prescribed burning, and it doesn't point to a clear-cut optimal level of prescribed burning. It doesn't tell me, what is the best option here. It's kind of all the same. The long-term dynamics in terms of bushfire management, and particularly in terms of prescribed burning, are very important. And in the long term, it becomes important to maintain a minimum level of prescribed burning, and I'll show you why. A long-term program generates substantial benefits compared to doing nothing. And the long-term analysis provides a more clear-cut answer, but up to a certain level. Beyond a certain level of prescribed burning is kind of a little bit similar in terms of the results, in the average results. So even when we do a lot of prescribed burning, there is always a residual risk. So there is still a risk of having major and catastrophic wildfires. They can still occur, even if we do a lot of prescribed burning. So it's important to keep this in mind, that there will be a residual risk. The spatial arrangement of the prescribed burn treatments, they generate different benefits, but they also have different costs. So I explored this a little bit in my PhD, and I discovered that we need better information on prescribed burning costs per hectare for different locations, mainly because the results are very sensitive to this particular parameter, to prescribed burning costs per hectare. So this shows the importance of developing risk-based approaches to prescribed burning, where we actually, focus more on targeting where the risk is highest. Because if we talk about an area, 15% or 10% of prescribed burning in our area, it can be arranged in many different things. And because the spatial arrangement makes a difference, we have to consider that. And economic analyses are then useful to determine where to get the best value for money for prescribed burning, but also for other fire management activities. So what I did, I modified an existing economic model and adapted it to actually evaluate investments in prescribed burning. The results of this model will tell me the investments in suppressions, cost, and in damages. And I made it spatially explicit. So I could I could assign different values to different things in the landscape, which wasn't done before in the literature. And I also vary the prescribed burning cost per hectare depending on their location, which wasn't done in the literature, wasn't done previously either. I use a simulator to simulate plenty of fires to see how different scenarios, what would be the results of different scenarios. And for that, I use geographic information systems. This is my case study area, a little bit south of Perth. It's one of the management areas from the Department of Parks and Wildlife. It's called the Southwest area. And it includes, the wine growing region, Margaret River, well known, a lot of forest. So this area, I divided into hectares. I divided the whole landscape into hectares. And for each hectare, I knew what the main land use was for that particular, for each cell in the landscape. So I had a couple of towns, some urban areas, some residential locations, so residential areas, where we had a lot of human assets. We also had forests, and forest means flammable vegetation, but it also means biodiversity. So we have, the Southwest is in a biodiversity hotspot, so we have conflicted sometimes objectives of protecting human assets, but also protecting biodiversity. I had also the land that the Department of Parks and Wildlife manages in the area. So prescribed burning could only be applied in certain areas. So I only tested for prescribed burning in depot managed land. And I had information on fires, on roads and towns, because usually fires have a high probability of being ignited close to towns and close to roads. There are a lot of the fires in the Southwest are actually caused by people. I also had a lot of information in terms of the fuel age. That's more or less how the fuels in the landscape look like. So the importance of the fuel age is that this is telling us how long it was since the last fire. So if it was between 0 and 3 years since the last fire, between 4 and 6 years since the last fire, in a particular location in the landscape, or more than that. The importance of that is that the more years you have since the last fire, the more fuels, dried matter, leaves, and branches accumulate in the landscape, and they increase the risk. It becomes like a matchbox. They increase the risk of bushfires. So I had lots of things as information for my inputs, and then I put all that into I fed all that into the Australia's bushfire simulator, worked with George Milne and Joel Kelso in computer science and software engineering at UWA to use their simulator and adapt it to my analysis. Simulated plenty of fires, and out of that, I got on the other side area burn and intensity. So I could tell in the landscape which cells were burned by the fires. I knew what was on that cell, and I knew with what intensity each cell had burned, so I could tell the level of damages that each cell had undergone depending on the level of intensity. Some results. But before that, after talking for a little bit, usually the attention span of a brain, an average human brain, is about 10 minutes, but I've been going on for about 13. So I'll do a brain reset so that everyone just stays here on focus. So I'll say some words, and I'll ask you to repeat them, please, after me, and that will wake us all up. So the first word, happy.
Happy.
Be.
Be.
Worry.
Worry.
Don't.
Don't.
And he says?
Don't worry.
Great. Awesome. Everyone with me? We can continue. So now to some results. So now you can all, without worrying and being happy, pay attention to a couple of the results. So what do they look like? This is what I'm going to present to you, and this is a little bit of an explanation of what we're looking for in the results. The idea is with the model is that we have a small investment in prescribed burning. We have a look at how much, as a consequence of that investment, we have a suppression cost and damages. If we invest a little bit more, if there is less suppression and damages. Here on the y-axis I have dollars. If we invest a little bit more, then, prescribed burning suppression damages, they are still lower. And maybe more, maybe we reduce them a little bit more. Who knows how much, but the idea is that we're looking here for the minimum here of these boxes. We put them all together, sum them up. Where is the minimum? So this is how they look. And when I talk about management cost, I will always be referring to prescribed burning and suppression together. So this is a short-term analysis. Some of you may have seen this. The short-term analysis here in blue shows the prescribed burning cost. Yes?
So what's suppression costs?
Suppression cost is firefighting cost. Sorry, thank you. Suppression expenditures is how much they spend in sending water bombers, firefighting resources, trucks, and everything that they require to actually fight and stop the fires.
When you say short-term, what's short-term?
1 year. 1 year analysis. Good, thank you. So a short-term analysis was a 1 year analysis, and a long-term analysis that was 10, 15 years plus analysis. So applying the same strategy either for just 1 year or the same strategy for 15 years. So for the short-term analysis, the minimum that, the level of prescribed burning that minimizes the sum of management cost and damages is 15% of the depot managed land in that case study area. But here we see that between prescribed burning 0%, 15%, 20%, there is not that much of a difference. So we don't have a real clear-cut answer in this short-term analysis. On average, it tells us that a short-term investment in prescribed burning, for $1, we get about $1.5 or $2 benefit. If we prescribe burn less than 10% or less of the depot managed land in the landscape, damages are about 75% of the whole package on average, and management cost, the rest, about 25%. If we prescribe burn 15% or more, damages are about 65%. So we reduce them a little bit, but not by that much, in terms as a proportion of the whole. So damages are always larger than management costs in this case. So the long-term analysis shows a very different picture. What I did here is that we had the same prescribed burning strategy for 15 years, prescribed burning in different locations, targeting the oldest, the places where the fuels were really, really old, to reduce there where there was the highest risk. And so we had prescribed burning strategy, and then there were wildfires at the end of the year. And then the next year we prescribed burning again, and then simulated wildfires again. And we did that for 15 years until we had, after 15 years, a landscape in which there had been prescribed burning for 15 years, and we also had wildfires occurring in between each year for 15 years. Make sense? Nod or say no. And
yes.
Yes.
So the percentage prescribed burning is all the same for all years, for all places. There's no special heterogeneity considered. For example, you close to roads, close to towns, you have high probability of fire risk, and then would a different percentage close to those areas change your story?
Good question, thank you. So what I did is that I kept the proportions exactly the same between the different levels of prescribed burning. So the current strategy of the Department of Parks and Wildlife is when they prescribe burn around 6 to 7% in the area. Out of those 6 or 7% of the land that they manage that they prescribe burn, 60% is done at least 15 to 20 kilometers away from towns, and the rest of the 40% is divided between, for the rest. So basically, I had a look at the percentages that they currently apply in the landscape, and I had the same proportions in between the different locations for all of my strategies, 5, 10, 15, or 20% of the landscape. Does that answer the question? So I kept the same proportions. So they basically, if they prescribe burn more. If they do 5% or 10, at 10% they will prescribe more area in the landscape. But they basically will double the amount that they prescribe burn in far away from towns, the amount of they prescribe burn in the medium distance from towns or close to towns. So the proportions are kept equal.
What Chumbo means is, like, each year you didn't burn the same 5% or the same 10%. You go to different.
Oh yes, yes,
right?
yes.
But also that special thing as well. But even that, is that 60%, 40%? How was that determined?
So
you take as default, but then can you change that? What's the rationale behind that 16?
Because that's what the Department of Parks and Wildlife does at the moment.
And you take that as optimal?
No, I take that as this is what I'm testing.
Okay. And then later on, would you change that? Are you going to change that?
Yes, in the next PhD.
What happens if you keep going with the percent? You've stopped at 20, when does it start going back up again?
Every year, for example.
Well, why not? I could test 25%. The chances of ever anyone doing that in that area are so low that I decided to not go beyond 20%. But true, it could actually go up, or it just could continue flat, who knows how long. So I just decided that 25% was just, there was no really much point on going much further than that. But true, I have no idea what the answer could be at this point. So here the minimum is 15, but we can see that it kind of flattens off beyond 10%. So there is a very big difference between doing nothing and 5%. Also a relatively large difference between doing 5%, prescribed burning 5% of the depot managed area, and 10%. But 10, 15, 20, the average is kind of the same. So the long-term analysis shows me that there are substantial benefits in having a prescribed burning program in the area compared to doing nothing. On average, $1 invested in prescribed burning in the area generates between 10 and 47% of dollars in benefits. That's quite high compared to doing nothing. So the long-term analysis, as I said before, provides a more clear-cut answer, but up to a certain level. Beyond 10% is a little bit, in terms of the average, is always a little bit similar. And at high levels of prescribed burning, more than 15%, the average management costs actually exceed the average level of damages. So we have more prescribed burning and suppression than actually damages per year on average. So just to compare, if we put the both graphs together, we can see how much of the benefits that we're missing here if we do only a short-term analysis. There is a lot there that is not telling us if we only do a one-year analysis. At 0%, it seems that there will be no problem, but in the long term, that could cause a lot more damages and more suppression costs. So the areas burned most often in the area were actually forested areas, but those that actually caused the highest damages, they actually came from urban areas. So this is also important in terms of, prioritizing prescribed burning investments for reducing risk. But here I want to show you the range of the results. So here the boxes, they show you, the boxes are between the 25th and 75th percentile, and the whiskers, they go up to, they cover all of the results. So they go to the highest results I've ever got for any of the strategies. So they basically have everything. So these are, what I showed you in the graphs before, are these, where these dots sit. This is the sum of everything, of management costs and damages. And here there is a line, might be visible in some and might not in others. That is the median. But have a look, these are the distribution of the results.
Is that the long or short term?
This is the long term. From now on is only long term. I'm not talking anymore about the short term. So this is all long term. So we can see that not only, what this is showing us is that prescribed burning reduces the average sum of management cost and damages, but it also reduces how they spread and reduces, here we see it a bit more clearly, the distribution of the results actually becomes smaller and smaller. That's quite interesting when you think about fire management, because the benefits are not only on reducing the average damages or management costs that we can have per year, but also in reducing that variability that we can have for those investments. Here is just the distribution of damages. So I've kind of cut the distribution of the damages between what for the area would be considered a major fire or a catastrophic fire. So at 0%, we see lots of little dots at the major and catastrophic level. At 5% of prescribed burning in the area, we still see catastrophic and major, just a little bit less. At 10%, so this is 10% is even more than what the Department of Parks and Wildlife actually does in the area currently. We still have chances of catastrophic fires occurring. Less chances, yes, but we still are likely to experience catastrophic fires in the area. Here, 15%, they're reduced by a lot, but we still have major fires, and the same at 20%. So this is also quite interesting because it shows that no matter the level of prescribed burning, I mean, no matter the level, because 15 or 20%, I don't know if they're all going to necessarily be applied in the future, but even with those levels of prescribed burning in the area, there are still chances of major and catastrophic fires occurring. So what does this all mean? The long-term analysis are extremely important when it comes to bushfire management. Strategic decision-making must adopt a long-term perspective because in the area, short-term evaluations of prescribed burning investments are not going to give us reliable answers of what is the best thing to do for the area. In the long term, it becomes important to maintain a minimum level of prescribed burning. But here in the model, the optimal levels derived for the model are quite high. So they are more or less the levels that were applied in the area in the 1960s. But now we had a lot of development, intensive fire suppression since then. So it's a little bit, and then climate change, the window of opportunity to apply prescribed burning costs is a lot smaller. So whether those levels are possible, that's another question, with the level of resources available. So I also investigated a little bit this prescribed burning close to human assets, so changing that proportion that I talked about, where at the moment I tested what the Department of Parks and Wildlife are doing, but then how about we actually intensify prescribed burning closer to towns and less further away in the forests. So these show me that the reduction in total bushfire area between the two strategies is similar, but there are larger reductions in damages when it comes to when we prescribe burn more intensely closer to towns. Damages, yes, decrease more rapidly with more prescribed burning concentrated close to towns, or in what we call the wild and urban interface. But prescribed burning costs also increase more rapidly because it's a lot more expensive. They need more resources. They need to be more careful, more planning for those prescribed burns that occur close to towns. So the different spatial arrangements of the treatments, they generate different benefits, but also different costs. And as I said before, we need better information on prescribed burning cost per hectare because the results are very sensitive to this. And this highlights the importance of developing risk-based approaches to prescribed burning. So how does this help you? You know, the 3 fire managers that I had here in the room. What can a fire manager do with this information? So it can help identify the options of where you get the best value for money. That is for prescribed burning. In the case of my analysis, it is for prescribed burning or suppression. But you can also have a lot of other different fire management activities. It gives an idea of whether there is a clear-cut answer or if there is a wide range of options that actually can be then implemented to satisfy different objectives that are sometimes conflicting, like protecting biodiversity and protecting also human assets. And it can also help identify what the results are sensitive to, because then we can identify the areas where we actually need better information to improve decision making and identify the tipping points. At which point is it better to change the strategy, because then I have values that are indicating, you know, that the best strategy is a different one. So what next? We have lots to do. So first, lots of work. We'll just keep working on bushfire management, because this is really kind of at the start. The economics, the application of economics to bushfire management is really kind of starting to take off. So it's kind of the time to get more information and do more analysis. We still have many areas where we lack information for this type of analysis, and there really is a need for more economic evaluation, especially as budgets become tighter and tighter, and we need to make sure that we allocate those resources in the best way. We also need to learn a bit more about prescribed burning in private land. There have been very, very little investigations or economic analysis in terms of prescribed burning in private land. At the moment, we've got a project where we are having a look at this, at the cost and benefits of prescribed burning in private land in the Mount Lofty Ranges in South Australia. And I plan to do that as well in the Western Australia in a second PhD. Yeah, right. But anyway, it could be the topic of another PhD, that's for sure. But my plan is to do kind of a follow-up on these, on exploring these possibilities of prescribed burning outside of the land managed by a fire agency or land management agency. It's also important to move a little bit more into the comparison between different options. So not only prescribed burning and suppression, but all the other activities or anything else that we could do in terms of managing bushfire risk. So, for example, we also did an economic analysis of different bushfire management options in the southwest of Western Australia, taking two contrasting areas in Western Australia to see what would be the best option in each of the areas. And we discovered that development restrictions are better for areas where there is a large wild and urban interface, large areas where houses and vegetation are kind of intermixed. And the prescribed burning is better for areas that are less development. But this is only between these two areas. It's not possible necessarily to generalize these results to all areas. But this was kind of an interesting indication of, okay, what's the best thing to do in an area to manage bushfire risk? We're also planning to investigate how fire events affect people's behavior and where they choose to live. So how a fire event will affect the housing market, for example. And how policy affects fire behavior. So in Western Australia, there has been a map release where you have designated bushfire-prone areas. So you're either in one bushfire-prone area or you're not. When people get this information and their house is located within a bushfire-prone area, how do they react to that? Does that change in any way their behavior? So we would like to explore these questions as well. That's coming for next year. Huh, Maxim? Impacts of disaster risk reduction programs. So this is another area where there is a lack of information. What are the costs and benefits of disaster risk education programs? You know, going out there, telling people what the risks are in terms of bushfires. What are the costs of doing that, and what are the benefits? The problem is that many of the benefits are intangible. They're non-market values. So we need to include them somehow in these analyses as well. Otherwise, we'll not have a comprehensive picture. So that's also another area in which we're moving into. And what is generally the value of intangibles, of non-market values, specifically relating to natural hazards? So here there is in the current project that we have with the Bushfire Natural Hazards CSE, this is a second part, like a part as well of the whole project, that is extremely important because a lot of these non-market values are affected by bushfires, and we need to know how. But they're also affected by other natural hazards, and a lot of the times they're not included in economic analysis because there is not a standard way of including them in this type of evaluation. So we're working also on that, on figuring out how to actually include them to evaluate different management options, taking into account non-market values. That's it for me. Thank you very much. Happy to take questions.